Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving into a really fascinating book that uses modern physics to explore one of the biggest questions we can ask. Where did all of this come from?
So let's just get right to it. Here's the core question the author asks. Can the rules that run our universe, the laws of physics, actually give us any clues about whether or not there's a creator behind it all?
And the author's answer is a resounding yes. The book builds this case, arguing that if you look closely at what science tells us about the universe's origin and its laws, you'll find some pretty strong hints of a creator's handiwork.
Now that is a huge claim, right? We're wading into some deep water here. We're going to see how the author uses concepts from science to try and answer a question that usually belongs to metaphysics. The kind of question physics normally says, hey, that's not our department.
So the whole argument is laid out in two main parts, kind of like a two-step investigation. First, we're going to look at the evidence from the very beginning of the universe. Then we'll look at the laws that have been running it ever since.
Okay, so let's get into the first major piece of evidence the author puts on the table. This all comes from what science currently tells us about how our universe got its start. And that, of course, is the Big Bang. Now, according to the author, the fact that the universe had a definite starting point is absolutely crucial. The logic is pretty straightforward. If it had a beginning, it couldn't have just popped itself into existence. It needs some kind of external first cause.
But wait a minute. What if that whole premise is wrong? To get around this whole first cause problem, some theories have suggested that maybe the universe is just eternal, that it's always been here, which means you wouldn't need a single moment of creation.
One of those ideas was the oscillating universe model. The thinking here is that the cosmos is caught in this endless loop. It expands out from a big bang, then collapses back in on itself in a big crunch, and then, boom, another big bang. Over and over, forever.
So you can see the huge difference here. On one side, you've got a universe with a clear born-on date, which makes you ask what happened before that. And on the other, you've got this self-sustaining, perpetual universe that just always was.
But, the author argues, there's a problem. This whole cyclical idea has been mostly set aside by physicists because it runs into some major scientific roadblocks. For example, it seems to violate the second law of thermodynamics. Basically, with each cycle, things would get a little more chaotic and disordered, making an infinite loop pretty much impossible.
So, by making the case that the science points much more strongly to a single Big Bang, the author establishes the first pillar of the argument. The universe is not eternal. It had a beginning. And if it had a beginning, it needed a beginner.
Okay, pillar number one is in place. Now for the second part of the argument, which is just as important. This time we're not focused on the start of the universe, but on the incredibly elegant and consistent way it works.
And to make this point, let's just think about something as fundamental as Newton's law of gravitation. This isn't just a vague idea. It's a super precise mathematical formula that perfectly describes how any two objects pull on each other, no matter where they are.
And that's the amazing part, right? These aren't suggestions. They're like unbreakable rules that the universe follows perfectly. The exact same law that makes an apple drop from a tree here on Earth is what's keeping Jupiter in its orbit billions of miles away. It's universal.
So, this is where the argument takes a turn from pure physics into philosophy. The author's point is this. When you find such complex, consistent, and universal laws, it implies that there must be a lawgiver, some kind of intelligence that set up the rules in the first place.
So, how do these two big ideas, a universe that had a definite beginning and a universe that runs on these beautiful, elegant laws, how do they come together to form the book's final conclusion?
Well, here's how the whole chain of logic fits together. First, the evidence says the universe had a starting point, so it needed a cause. Second, that universe isn't just some chaotic mess. It operates on an incredibly precise and fine-tuned set of rules. You put those two things together, and the author says it points to a masterful creation.
And that really is the heart of the entire book. The idea that science, and physics in particular, doesn't lead us away from the idea of a creator, but actually provides compelling signs that point right towards it.
And that kind of leaves us with one last big question to think about. No matter what you personally conclude from the arguments in this book, it really challenges you to think about the limits of science. What kind of questions can science answer, and what kind of questions can it not? It's a fascinating place where physics and philosophy collide, and a perfect place to end our explainer.